Hello, and welcome to the Family Scoop.
where you get the scoop in 10 minutes.
I'm Maddie.
And I'm Toria.
We're students at BYU. I'm studying family studies.
And I'm studying editing and publishing with a minor in family studies.
And we love talking about families. So, let's get the scoop.
All right. Today we're going to be talking about how to teach children about sex in a healthy way. Now, this is a topic I'm super excited to talk about because I've heard way too many horror stories from friends about how they learned about sex, and I just feel like there has to be a better way. Maddie, do you want to start us off with that?
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you. From all the different studies and projects that I've been a part of, horror stories abound.
Yeah.
There are so many out there, which of course is not shaming. We have a lot of new information and new understandings now because of this research. So, no shame in how you might have already taught kids about sex.
Or how you may have learned about it.
Exactly. But there are some good ways that research has found to be very healthy. So, we do want to talk about that. The three most important things for kids to know that we're going to cover today is correct anatomical knowledge, knowing reasons behind sex, and that sex is taught in a timely manner.
Wow, that's so interesting. Let's start off with the first one.
Yeah, perfect. So we'll start off with correct anatomical knowledge. So this can be a super uncomfortable conversation only if you make it uncomfortable. You can also teach this information just as easily as you teach head, shoulders, knees, and toes. It is just another body part, and you making it awkward is what makes it awkward.
Oh, like they're gonna learn, oh, mom's acting like it's awkward, so I guess this is awkward.
Exactly. And so if you don't teach like these body parts and this topic in a comfortable way, then kids aren't going to feel comfortable coming to you with questions.
Because they're like, that's awkward. I'm not gonna ask my parents about that.
Exactly. But it's really a simple thing. You want to teach correct body parts, which includes, and it can be simple, things like the vulva, the penis, testicles, vaginal canal, just these very basic parts. And then once you teach the basic parts and they understand their body parts, men and women, both genders should understand both parts.
Okay.
Then you also want to teach how the body parts work together. Once again, this does not have to be in a ton of detail.
Could you give us maybe an example of how that would work?
Yeah, absolutely. Something you could say to a kid that would be very simple but still straightforward.
And correct.
Yeah, and correct, which is big. Is that when a man and woman have sex, the men's penis will get kind of bigger and hard, and it will be able to be inserted into the woman's vaginal canal. And that action of the penis going into the vaginal canal is called sex.
Wow, that was really simple.
I know, like that's it.
It's not very complicated.
Exactly, because they're kids. They don't need all of this information, but they need it. They need the basics. And so from there, once they have kind of the basics of understanding body parts and how they work together, you move on to explaining why we have sex. So the reasons can be your very own, depending on, religion and family and all these different things. But there are two big reasons that research has found to be the most helpful and the most important when helping kids who, then turn into teenagers have a healthy sexual life
Okay.
and safe. The reasons are understanding procreation, understanding that, you make babies, and then understanding that it's meant for pleasure and bonding in marriage. And marriage specifically, that is not a very huge topic in this day and age.
And not very widely accepted.
Exactly. It's not a big thing. But research has shown that if you're abstinent until marriage, there are crazy benefits.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. But of course, that's not what we're talking about today. So we'll keep it to the kids.
So, what does the research say about both those reasons, procreation and pleasure in marriage?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, research has shown, especially once the kids hit teenage years, if they understand the responsibility of a child and how sex brings a child, then studies have shown that they are less likely to engage in sex, and if they do, they are more likely to use safe contraceptives. The second thing is that when teens understand the emotional ties that come with sex, they are once again less likely to engage and more likely to wait until they find someone who is truly ready to be committed in a loving and legal relationship. And the emotional ties that I talk about with this is when teens understand that oxytocin is released during sex, they understand that there's actually a physical, like chemical bond that is created between the two partners having sex that not only is very beautiful, but it's also very painful when it has to be broken. And so understanding like this how special it is, but also the pain that comes from misusing it, teens are less likely to engage.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So one important thing to know about talking about sex is that you should not have the do's and the don'ts of sex in the same conversation. So,
Really?
yes, so this can be things like pornography or masturbation or unsafe sex, even talking about consent, which is a super important topic, shouldn't be talked about at the same time as sex because especially for the first conversation, you do not want any hint of fear or shame in talking about sex.
Oh, because that can like associate together.
Exactly, that's the big reason.
But I feel like lots of parents and people in general are going to think when I talk to my kid about sex, I need to warn them that there are also dangers out there. Like you can get addicted to pornography and masturbation. And so you need to be careful and things like that. And so it's really interesting to hear that you should separate those conversations so that they feel separate and they can feel like sex is a good thing and that doesn't need to be paired with those other things that you brought up.
Exactly. Kids shouldn't be scared about sex. And so while those conversations are super important to have, it's super important to not have them at the same time.
Fascinating.
Mhm.
So when talking about all these things like to explain to your kids, it makes me wonder when the right time to approach your kids about talking about sex would be. Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, great. That's a great question. And research also has had an answer to this.
Oh, good.
Research shows that if you want your kids, one, to feel safe coming to you with questions, and then two, to have the same views about sex as you do, then you need to be their first contact with sex.
They need to be learning about it like from you.
Exactly,
Okay.
from you as the first time they hear about it. So hearing about jokes about sex in school before they understand what it is already creating this negative connotation, this negative thing, and so it's going to be harder for them to understand it from your point of view. So the best age that we can be having like the talk or
First one.
the first one, yes, starting to talk to your kids about sex is between the ages of 6 and 8.
Oh,
And
that's young.
I know, and definitely no older than 8.
Wow.
Yeah, which is crazy, but I mean, we remember school. Even in elementary school, I remember hearing jokes about sex. Like, it happens really young, and especially with the prevalence of pornography around, it's important to start young so that they can understand. So when they encounter these different things, either jokes or images or whatever, it's not a shock to them. They already know what's happening. Um, but once you have the talk, dun dun dun, the talk, it's really not that scary. Once you have like the first talk with them, it should be a very normal topic of conversation that is brought up around once a week.
Once a week, that's a lot.
I know, right? It's kind of a lot, but just like you're going to check in with them about their day and check in about friends and check in about their schoolwork, all these different things, it's also important to check in about if they've had any questions or friends have said anything or, anything that might come up. And that's another time to have one of those other conversations.
So you're not saying it has to necessarily be like, all right, we're going to sit down and talk about sex for 30 minutes, like once a week. It's just going to be like hey, have you had any questions this week?
Yeah,
And that could be
exactly.
it. Like,
Yeah.
that's it. And they're like, no, not really. Or they could be like, yeah, Jimmy said something about this. What does that mean? You're
No.
like, oh, XYZ, done.
That is exactly it. It doesn't have to be this huge talk, but you can be like, do you still kind of remember? Do you have questions now? Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, just to check in.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like, it might feel awkward, especially like the first few months, maybe. But the thing is, if you start when they're like 8 years old, by the time they're 16 and totally into the dating field and have all of these confusing things going on, they're going to be so normal and comfortable with you talking about sex that when it's really going to matter and be really important, then they know they can come to you.
Wow. I know a lot of people think that if they teach their kids about sex, then their kids are going to want to have sex. What does research say about that?
Yeah, that is a great question because I know so many people who are like, we can't talk to them about sex or they're going to go out and have sex. And tons of research projects have been done on that exact question because so many people have thought about it. The answer is a resounding no.
No?
No.
Wow.
There is nothing that supports that notion at all.
That's crazy.
I know. In fact, what's crazier is actually the exact opposite. When kids who were taught about sex in healthy ways, they are less likely to engage in unsafe sexual activities.
I guess that makes sense.
I know, right? Because it's not this mysterious, spooky thing that's going on. They're like, no, this is a very matter of fact. I know what's happening. And because I know what's happening and because I know the consequences, I'm choosing not to, or I'm choosing to be safe while doing this.
That makes sense. I can tell it's really important for kids to know about sex and to learn at a young age. But my question is it the parents that really need to teach them, or can they learn it healthy ways from like their peers or somebody else?
Yeah, that is a great question. And it definitely doesn't have to be the parents. It can be other forms of guardians or, older siblings if they're older and like actually mature about this topic. But there are some drawbacks from other options like that aren't parents. One is most sex ed programs do not teach the same principles and can have a really big effect on how people view sex, porn, and their self-image. So right now, how sex education programs are going, that is definitely not the way for your kid to be learning about it. The next thing is that research has shown that there's a greater bond and connection between the kid or the teen and whoever taught it. And so, if you want that greater connection to your teenager, one of the best ways to do it is having you, as the parent, be the person that introduces and talks about this topic. And then, of course, the last thing is that friends and the internet and other sources they might go to probably are not going to be teaching the same principles. And they're definitely not going to be talking about safe contraceptives and, making sure you're in a stable relationship. That is not what teenagers talk about. So it's just important to understand because the views that kids and who grow into teenagers, the views that they have on sex is going to impact their sexual life for their entire life. And we want them to have a healthy view of sex so that they can have a healthy marital sexual relationship, which is beautiful and phenomenal and really helps the two come together and become one.
And it all starts as a kid learning about it from your parents.
Exactly. And the last thing is that studies have shown that when kids understand their own bodies and understand what sex is and this like whole sexual aspect of themselves, they are more confident in themselves. They have higher self-esteems.
Wow.
Yeah, a kind of crazy thing that you probably wouldn't guess from teaching kids about sex.
Sounds like there's a lot of benefits to starting young and starting simple.
Exactly.
Wow. Thanks for listening today.
And make sure to check out our Instagram account, The Family Scoop, to see posted content as well as our references to the studies mentioned in our podcast episodes.
We're so glad you joined us today on
The Family Scoop.